We're very pleased to have Chris Bruno, who is with Capital Public Radio as their marketing director. And he's responsible for defining and implementing strategic communications and development initiatives that increase brand visibility, audience loyalty, and revenue growth. So I think you've all been reading, we've all been hearing about Capital Public Radio in the news. So Chris spoke to us last year, and he had lots of interesting things to tell us. And of course, there have been additional developments, additional findings, and so it's really wonderful to have you back, Chris. Thank you very much for joining us, and you have that mic. Okay, very good. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Bruno from Capital Public Radio.
Chris, am I good? Can you hear me? Okay, good. Everyone, it's wonderful to be back in front of all of you. It's always a pleasure to get a chance to present to the Renaissance Society. I do want to say again, thank you, Deborah, for inviting me back here and having this opportunity, and everyone that helped put this together. Also, Sue McGinty is not in the audience today. She is off abroad, but I want to say thank you for connecting me to Deborah and the Renaissance Society. Very, very special opportunity. So as you are all aware, Cap Radio, we've been going through quite the journey over the last 9 to 12 months. Most recently, you may have heard about the forensic examination that was commissioned by Sacramento State that was released in August. Now, we're going to talk about a number of things, including the building a better Cap Radio, which we've been working on over the last 9 months. I do want to start, though, with a disclaimer in regards to the forensic examination. We cannot, at Cap Radio, repurpose, reproduce, summarize, speculate about anything related to what is in the forensic examination. It was fully commissioned by Sacramento State, and it is just a factual analysis. Now, when we get into the Q&A, I will be happy to dive and answer any questions that you might have and answer to the full extent that I possibly can, or that is allowed legally, if you will. But we'll have a chance to cover some of these issues as well as many more at Cap Radio, because despite everything that's happened, the future at Cap Radio is much brighter, and we're very excited where we're going moving forward.
You ready?
Yep. Perfect. Well, yeah, we can move right to the first slide. So starting back up, so one of the things that I think is important, because it is in many ways related to what came out of the forensic examination to some extent, is the September 27th CSU audit of last year. So if any of you recall, there was an audit that came out from the California State University that identified a number of issues and deficiencies with Cap Radio, reporting, record keeping, oversight, management, and everything else. In fact, the CSU audit identified 17 observations that included 42 recommendations that Cap Radio needed to implement to come into compliance with CSU guidelines and regulations. Now, one of the things, while I cannot speak directly about the forensic examination, I can talk about things related to the CSU audit that are related to the forensic examination. So, so for example, and again, I do not know how familiar everyone is with the forensic examination, but a few of the things that I do want to point out, and these are all things that came from the observations and the recommendations. And before I dive into some of these, I am pleased to tell you that it is a significant number of compliance recommendations that Cap Radio is working on with Sacramento State. And we have submitted 31 of the recommendations that were due in April. They're all being reviewed and finalized with the CSU Chancellor's Office. And we are completely on track to submit the final 11 recommendations by the end of September, which is pretty exciting, because all of these things are going to help us come into compliance and ensure that moving forward, nothing that happened in the forensic examination could ever happen again. And that's the problem, is that we did not have a number of internal controls in place and working in compliance to ensure that some of the things that occurred would happen. So for example, a few of these highlights: cash and check handling. So creating a clear separation of duties. So this is making sure that there are more than one person in charge of handling cash and checks. This is incredibly important when we're looking at managing donations and everything related to that from a funding standpoint. So we now have multiple people and delegation of authority, separation of duties to ensure that all of the processing and everything that goes with that is done in a way that has multiple fail-safes and checks and balances. Credit cards. So this is something that came up significantly in the forensic examination. Nobody at Cap Radio today has a credit card. So it is impossible for there to be potentially erroneous charges, charges that do not have any kind of proper documentation. All of that has been immediately addressed. Accounting and reporting. So one of the first things that we did is that we contracted out all of our accounting to Sacramento State. And I will say, Tabitha and the team at Sacramento State, thank you so much. We had at any given time, maybe 1 to 2 people doing accounting work at Cap Radio. We have a dedicated team of 5 people at Sacramento State that are working on all of our finances and accounting and putting together all of the systems in place to make sure that we have full understanding of cash management, the way everything is being used. And I have to thank them for everything they're doing on that front. We'll dive a little bit deeper when it comes to some of the reporting and the accounting side of it. But that has been a significant piece of our turnaround story that we've been working on. And again, delegation of authority, making sure that there are only certain people that can do or approve certain things. And again, the checks and balances, not one person that can go and turn around and just do anything without any kind of oversight or accountability, especially related to financial related activities and transactions. And again, board policy. So this is something that obviously came up. We are now actively working on updating our board policies, including updates to our bylaws, which are significantly outdated, and making sure that conflicts of interests are all in order. And this is something that, which we'll dive into a little bit more, when we reconstituted Cap Radio's board of directors in February of this year, a lot of the onboarding process that we have gone through has included understanding what it means, a fiduciary responsibility being on the board of directors at Cap Radio, as well as what it means to be on a nonprofit board at Cap Radio that is an auxiliary of Sacramento State, because things are a bit different than perhaps a normal 501c3 nonprofit, because we are connected directly to Sacramento State as an auxiliary. And so there are other things that maybe other nonprofits may not need to comply with, such as education code. So this is something that's been a big part of that process. And one side note there, since our board of directors was reconstituted, we have been meeting with the board every 2 weeks. And as you know, that is atypical. Usually boards meet quarterly. Every 2 weeks, we have a highly engaged board, and it's been a breath of fresh air to work with them as they're working on helping to secure the future of Cap Radio moving forward. Okay, I think we can move forward. So one of the things that I do also want to address, because related to all of this, is Cap Radio's finances. There have been many stories in the media, as well as just the reality that Cap Radio was navigating a financial crisis that really came to light in the fall of last year. Now, I was lucky enough to make a presentation to the Renaissance Society a number of months ago, and what is truly remarkable is the progress that we are making and how quickly we are making it. So back in March 15th, and by the way, just to provide a little bit of perspective, we had a new interim president and general manager, Frank Maranzino. He came on board March 1st. As of March, we were very excited to have lowered our accounts payable by about $1 million to around $4.5 million. We had just executed 6 of 7 payment plans with our major vendors. So these are vendors like American Public Media, NPR, content licensing, things like that, those vendors. And we had caught up on all of our other outstanding bills. So when everything came to light and we really dug into it back in the fall, we had over 1,000 outstanding unpaid invoices. Now, by March, we had caught up on all of those. We were working on executing major payment plans, and we had lowered our immediate accounts payable. Within 3 months, we had paid down accounts payable $2.5 million more, down to $2 million. We had paid off 5 of 7 of our major vendors ahead of schedule, which is pretty remarkable. And we projected positive cash flow for Cap Radio for the remainder of the year. Now, one of the things that I will say related to the major vendors, while one of them is NPR, we have executed a payment plan with them, and we have secured NPR content for programming through 2028. So everything is being taken care of. We have a payment plan in place. We have not missed any of those payments, and we're continuing to move forward in a financially sustainable manner. Additionally, and this kind of goes into some of what's been going on with the CSU audit compliance, we reinstituted internal controls, very, very important for us moving forward. We started last year's fiscal year 23-24 financial audit, and we just approved by the board and President Wood and the office next year or this year's fiscal year budget. And it's a balanced budget. In fact, we actually, as conservative as we were, projected revenue over expenses. So we are sustainable and stable, which is something that, to be perfectly frank, 6 or 9 months ago, we probably could not say, because there was a lot that we were navigating. But truly, the dedication and hard work of everyone at Cap Radio, Sacramento State, and I will look at all of you as listeners and supporters, is how we're in this place right now. Okay, I think we can. Now, one of the things is sometimes trying to put all of this into perspective, because it has been such a long journey over the last 9 months. And I just want to look at, give or take, about a 12-month timeline here. So in July of 2023, President Wood started as the new president of Sacramento State. Now, in August, he appointed Tom Carlo, who was the former president and general manager of KPBS in San Diego, to come in and try to deal with everything that was starting to come to light at Cap Radio. This was when, unfortunately, we had the layoffs at Cap Radio. There were some programming cuts. It ended up being around 15% of the staff at Cap Radio. And to be honest, over the next 6 months or so, attrition led to about a 35% reduction in staff at Cap Radio. In September, we had our fall fundraiser. The California State University audit was released. Media started reporting about solvency issues around Cap Radio. In October, we contracted accounting out to Sacramento State. The forensic examination was commissioned by Sacramento State. We had 14 of our board members resign. There were Cap Radio was then projected to be insolvent by January. We then had 4 additional board members resign. In November, $2.85 million in funding that Cap Radio expected to receive was put on hold by lawmakers. Now, I will go on a slight side note here, but one of the things that occurred with that funding, so this was a funding that had been earmarked by McCarty and Matsui, and this was part of a federal grant. And the way that that worked is that prior leadership at Cap Radio had assumed, because of those discussions, that we were going to be granted this funding that had been earmarked. However, the way it worked is that we were looking to get reimbursed for certain projects that were being built downtown. But the federal grant, that money could not be distributed and used for projects that had already been completed. So we could not be reimbursed for it. So even though the money had been put on hold, Cap Radio could never have received it. And that, again, all of the things adding up to the financial crisis that we had to navigate. We then started deploying major operational improvements, finding ways to operate more efficiently. Then we went into our fundraiser in December. So this is kind of the crisis period for us, where we were really navigating a period of uncertainty. If we go to the next slide, please. Then we started working on stabilizing the organization. So in December, we announced some improved financial position and situation, a spike in member support and ratings. Now in January, we hired Nia Town to lead Cap Radio's newsroom. Nia's been a breath of fresh air, but one of the things is despite, well, everything related to the financial crisis, mismanagement and other issues at Cap Radio, it's beyond just the financial situation that we had to navigate. The head of our newsroom left in June of 2023. It took us 7 months to find the next person to lead our newsroom. However, in January, we were able to bring on Nia Town, and there's so much more to say about that moving forward. But again, these are all the pieces of Cap Radio putting everything together as we work on stabilizing and rebuilding for the future. In February, we reconstituted our board of directors. Tom Carlo stepped down after stabilizing the core operations at Cap Radio in March. Frank Maranzino was appointed our new interim president and general manager. We then finalized payment plans with all 7 major vendors, and we caught up on over 1,000 unpaid invoices. We can go to the next slide. Now we start looking at truly building and toward the future. In May, we supported Big Day of Giving with a major media partnership, and we achieved our highest weekly news listening audience in 18 months. We attained a record daily time spent listening on the music station. In June, we ended our fiscal year with a 9% increase in member support. Now, to put this in perspective, the public media industry at large had about flat growth last year. Cap Radio had a 9% increase in support. So I'm going to take this opportunity to all of you who are listeners and supporters of Cap Radio. That is all of you. And I will say thank you from the bottom of my heart and from everyone at Cap Radio, because without the support of Sacramento State and without the support of the community and all of you, we would not be here. But we are, and we're building something much, much better moving forward into the future. So we ended it projecting no financial issues for the rest of the year. In July, a series, we hired 2 new politics reporters. We announced the launch of our new politics and government team. We now have 2 dedicated State House reporters. We have a politics editor, Chris Nichols, who was formerly our PolitiFact California reporter. We hire a senior broadcast engineer because Cap Radio, we do not just operate 1 station in Sacramento or 1 news and 1 music station in Sacramento. We actually operate 32 broadcast towers that reach from Modesto to Eureka. At the end of the day, Cap Radio is and serves most of Northern California. We hire a new communities reporter as we work on building around more local coverage. We partnered with the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative as we work at expanding important health equity reporting and serving more communities in Stockton and Modesto. And then we announced expanded jazz programming, which started up on August 15th. So a series of very, very positive notes moving forward. I think we can go to the next slide. So now what I want to talk to you a little bit about is the future. Because Cap Radio now, we're not in survival mode. We're not just trying to get by. We have stabilized the organization. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're looking at the future of Cap Radio and public media. So as I stated earlier, Cap Radio, we operate 32 broadcast towers from Modesto to Eureka. What we're looking at building out right now and working on is looking at how can we provide more local service and coverage to local communities. We serve and have coverage in Stockton and Modesto, in Sacramento, in Chico, in Humboldt, and that's just 4 of the core local hubs that we're looking to build around. And we're going to do this in part by investing our own resources into local coverage. As I've said, we hired 1 in July and 1 more in August, Sacramento-focused community reporters. So they're going to be expanding the local coverage that we provide. Now, to put this a little bit into context, so all of you listen, and we have NPR coverage. So Morning Edition, All Things Considered. I'm sure many of those are some of your favorite programs. From a linear programming standpoint, that national programming and those shows are set up in a certain order. And then they offer individual opportunities for us to provide local coverage throughout the national programs. So any given day, there's around 75 minutes of potential for us to add in local coverage into those core shows. Now, when Nia Town, going back to the hiring of Nia to lead our newsroom, came on board, we were only using about 10% of that to provide local coverage in Sacramento. Today, that's up over 50%. So when you're tuning in, you are hearing more headlines, more local news stories, more features that are from the Sacramento region and the coverage that we offer. And we're continuing to invest in that. We're also investing in building out more coverage in Stockton and Modesto and in Chico, because we actually operate North State Public Radio. And then there's KHSU in Humboldt. We're also working on partnering with other mission-driven organizations for us to expand and serve more communities. And as we do this, because local news is absolutely at risk. You're seeing local news organizations shut down, newspapers are either declining or going away, and the future of local news is incredibly important, and a service that as local public media, we do need to invest in. As we do that though, Cap Radio also operates something called the Cap Radio Network. So we have a partnership with over a dozen NPR stations throughout the state of California. And we deliver our state and regional coverage to these stations every single day. It actually covers, and our content is provided and serves 97% of California counties every single day. So when we invested in the politics and government team, being in the State House, providing this coverage, many of the smaller stations, which is a vast majority of the stations throughout California, they actually rely on Cap Radio's coverage to provide relevant regional and local coverage to their communities. Because otherwise, they're just offering national coverage from NPR or international coverage from BBC, et cetera. So as we're building around serving local communities more relevantly, with local coverage, some of that coverage becomes regionally or statewide relevant. To provide some examples, the Park Fire. So when that occurred, we actually joined forces with our newsrooms to cover that and deploy more resources to cover everything that was going on. And that coverage was then distributed throughout our regional network. And I don't know if any of you have heard of the 209 Times, but that's a news, well, quote unquote, news organization in Stockton that, as Stockton has lost most of the credible news and trustworthy news sources, has come up and presented themselves as a news source. What we're finding out and what's been discovered is that they're using that presentation to try to influence elections and coverage. So Mayor Tubbs, for example, was directly attacked by that news organization and influenced the coverage and the outcomes of elections. And this has been something that obviously is very relevant for Stockton, but is just as relevant when you see what's at stake to regional and statewide audiences. When we're thinking about the rise of social media, disinformation, misinformation, and the way all of that's coming together. So as we're looking at the future, that's what we're working to build around, is much more local coverage to supplement all of the coverage that comes from NPR, BBC, and any of our other content partners. And what's really exciting is that our investment so far, because we have increased so much of the local coverage in Sacramento, we are seeing results. So we just got our Nielsen ratings for August. And I'm very, very excited to share that if we compare it to a year ago, our weekly listening audience is up 40%. It's significant. Thank you. We're very, very excited. And any given week, when we look at just our regional, I'm not talking about the statewide distribution, just our regional coverage, we serve nearly 500,000 people. That is what that is the importance of what we do, but also what motivates everyone at Cap Radio, because we are here, we are a mission-driven, purpose-bound organization. We exist to create more informed, involved, and educated communities. And that's what's driving us moving forward as we look at building a better future. I think we can go to the next slide. So I want to provide you with a few updates, which are pretty exciting. So one of the things that we're working on moving forward is looking at building out what we call the infrastructure. So one of the issues that we've been dealing with is thinking about how can we operate more efficiently, how can we be more unified, and how does that improve the service that we offer to local, regional, and statewide audiences that we serve. So as I mentioned, we in 2021 and 2022 entered into public service operating agreements with North State Public Radio and KHSU in Humboldt. Now, the way that had been working is that we essentially were almost completely independent. We had these operating agreements, but we were working very independently. And what we're working to do now is create more coordination and closer infrastructure as we look at unifying our newsroom. So again, when I mentioned the Park Fire, what was interesting is that when that first started, North State Public Radio was primarily airing just the typical standard programming. We were able to then activate the Cap Radio newsroom in Sacramento to work with NSPR, and then we started delivering all the coverage, the fire alerts. We started working with CAL FIRE, with counties, to make sure that all the information on the fire and what was taking place was getting out to everyone that needed that information. And we were covering it in a way that was much, much more comprehensive. And so we're working at putting together systems so that our newsrooms are coordinating, meeting regularly, making sure that we're all on the same page so we can better serve our local communities moving forward. We're also looking at broadcast infrastructure improvements. So as I said, a vast majority of the radio programming, it's called linear programming, it revolves around these core shows like Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and everything else. So what we're working at trying to do is build the system and structure so that we can manage that from a central location. And then as we start producing more and more local content, we can then, from a central hub, deliver local content to Stockton and Modesto, to Sacramento, to Chico, to Humboldt. And all of that can be done in a way that is far more efficient because of the way that's currently set up. And of course, we're working with the CSU system because there are a lot of things that some of the fun in trying to make sure that licenses and everything like that are all structured in a way that are going to put us in a position to operate even better in service of our communities. So again, I did mention we have a new politics and government team, and this is very, very exciting for us, especially as we enter into a very, very important presidential election this year. So for the first time in, gosh, many, many years, we now have 2 fully dedicated State House reporters. We also have a full-time politics reporter. They are focused on making sure that people understand the impact of all policy decisions, as well as holding those in power accountable. And this coverage, again, is distributed every single day throughout the state of California. So one of the things that I always find so remarkable is that you may have heard through some of our on-air messaging that we received a very, very generous matching gift pledge from the Momi family. Well, one of the brothers is actually down in LA, and he's a huge fan of KCRA and always tunes in. But he actually is very, very familiar with Cap Radio because he hears us every single day because our state government reporting is distributed and aired by KCRW in LA. And that's what's pretty remarkable with everything that we're doing here. Now, we're also trying to do it even better, and we're looking at putting together, and we're about to deploy that in the next week or two, a survey of local NPR stations, because part of what we do is seeing how we can better serve NPR stations and the local communities that they serve. And so we're trying to find out now if there are more ways for us to communicate, and if there are specific issues that we, again, are in a unique position being in Sacramento, if we can ask about various different things that are occurring in specific communities throughout the state. And again, we're working on a number of local partnerships. I absolutely highlighted the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, which is a key part of us building around Stockton and Modesto, but there are many, many more partnerships. And I'm going to wait for the next slide because I'm going to show you some pretty exciting stuff that's coming up from a partnership and event standpoint. But I also want a chance to talk a little bit about student journalists, because part of what we're doing and we're recommitting to is our educational mission. Now, I will tell you something that to me is pretty scary, but based on a report from Northwestern, the 2023 State of Local News, in California alone, since 2005, we have lost over 60% of our local journalists. And that's something, that is a trend that is not stopping. So when we look at the future, part of what we need to look at doing is how do we create and develop the journalists of tomorrow? And why are we not taking advantage of opportunities, especially with our affiliation with Sacramento State, to do so? So I am very, very excited to announce that starting in the fall, we are offering internships for Sacramento State students, including a number of student journalists. We have currently in the budget for 6 internships for each semester. So that's going to be starting up. But ultimately, what we're trying to really work toward is something that's much, much bigger than just internships. We actually want to build a student journalism program, something that could be over multiple years and have a progression. And when we look at our network and coverage as well as our news partners, we'd really love to be in a position where after that, there could be guaranteed placement in a small market so that there's that investment and that reward for being able to learn on the job and get your career started. So there's a lot that we're really, really excited about and that we're working toward. And this is just a little bit of a glimpse of that. So one of the things when I talk about partnerships and everything that's happening that's very exciting is we have a lot coming up, especially related to the election, but just in general. One of the things I want to highlight a few of these, we're not going to dive into all of them, but on September 24th, we partnered with Cal Matters and Sacramento State, in fact, the State Hornet, to put on small group discussions with the student community to discuss local, statewide election issues, to start promoting informed and engaged voting. And we're very, very excited at this initial opportunity. Working with the State Hornet, we're just getting started on a partnership that we hope that we can continue to evolve, providing real-world experience and working together in collaboration on certain stories and opportunities between the newsrooms. Additionally, we have California on the Ballot. We partnered with the California Humanities and the James B. McClatchy Foundation. This is going to dive deep into voting and the election, the rise of mail-in ballots, and what that means to engagement during this election. We're also going to be doing quite a bit of coverage overall with our newsroom. I'm very excited as well because we just created the largest partnership to date with the Mondavi Center. So I don't know if there are any of you that are classical and jazz fans at Cap Radio. And by the way, Cap Radio is the exclusive broadcast source of classical and jazz in the region. But for Mondavi's next season, there are 20 shows. Cap Radio will be emceeing half of them. So you'll get a chance to be in front of our hosts at classical and jazz performances at Mondavi with some of these upcoming ones that we're very, very excited about. And we're also working on, with the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, a major District 13 debate on October 25th in Modesto. So we're very, very excited about everything that we're working on as we move forward. and there's a whole lot more in store. And I do just want to take one last moment to thank all of you as listeners and supporters of Cap Radio, because we could not be in this position without you. And we want you to know that we are fully committed moving forward to building a better Cap Radio, and one that is dedicated to fulfilling our public service mission. So I think that gives us a little over 15 minutes for Q&A.
Thank you. Here, I can hold it. Okay. I may be the only one that needs to ask this question, but could you explain Cal Matters? You have it up there twice, and I kept thinking, now exactly what is Cal Matters?
Okay, yeah, sorry. Should have mentioned that. Cal Matters is a statewide nonprofit news organization. So they cover a lot of policy and statewide issues. And so they're one of the many partners that Cap Radio is working with to increase and expand these important public services that we offer.
They funded.
They're funded primarily through donors, grants, and the like. Yes.
Hold on. Okay. First of all, what a great success story and turnaround for Cap Radio from your last presentation. So kudos. Secondly, sorry to say I've only heard about it from your last presentation. Can I get it on Alexa I don't even know how to get to Cap Radio. I don't have a radio, and maybe in the car. I don't listen to radio at all.
Sure.
I'm on the web. I get my news from the web.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a variety of different ways that you can access Cap Radio. You can visit capradio.org, and there you can stream Cap Radio. You can read stories or anything that you'd like. On Alexa, yes, you can ask Alexa to play Cap Radio News or Cap Radio Music. That is also an option. You can download the Cap Radio app, which would provide opportunities to stream or read articles. You can also do things like sign up for our newsletters as well.
Make sure you put the 88.9 or the 90 point whatever, or Alexa will tell you no.
Okay. Well, yeah, technology can be a little double-edged sword sometimes.
I'd like to echo the feelings and expressions of the last of this young lady up here. That what a turnaround! It really is remarkable. But what's missing from the presentation goes to her question.
Yeah.
Digital distribution. This is all terrestrial that you're talking about, and the future for radio is digital.
Yeah.
So address that. What are the future plans for like TuneIn and other digital platforms for distribution of your radio products?
Yeah, so I appreciate it. That's a great question, and that's something that we're working towards. So one of the things that we're looking at right now, given the situation at Cap Radio, is we're trying to work on building a lot of the infrastructure. While radio long-term, terrestrial radio, is certainly not growing and will eventually decline, there's still significant opportunity at Cap Radio from that standpoint. So what we're working at doing right now is building around core content infrastructure needs. In the future, regardless of distribution, which I'll touch on in just a minute, we need to focus more on local content and connecting more to local communities, because that is going to be more and more important and relevant in the future. As we work on building that infrastructure, there's significant opportunity for Cap Radio to grow sustainably with our existing legacy business model when we look at radio. Some of the things I'm going to try not to get a little, too into the weeds here, but if we look at some of the just general conservative estimates, like county populations that we cover, and you look at trying to get around 5 to 10%, which is a very conservative estimate as listeners, and then around 5 to 10% of those as members from a sustainability standpoint, we look at things like Stockton and Modesto. We provide almost no local coverage at all. It's only really NPR. And we have several thousand members alone there. If we actually produced relevant, local, consistent content to serve Stockton and Modesto residents with those conservative projections, we could grow membership there by around 10,000 So part of it is how are we doing things now that are going to help us grow sustainably within our legacy model, but how are we doing that in a way that's going to be relevant and keep us growing into the future? And this is where we get into all of the local content, because the stories that connect with people locally, then it becomes distribution, because linear programming and listening all day long, that is changing. When you look at younger generations, they're not tuning in. I mean, television, radio, they're not just doing sort of this, program listening. They want on-demand content. But if we're producing the kind of content that is consistent and relevant to local communities, then it's building the proper ecosystem that we're looking at to deliver that content in a way that will allow them to get it based on their interests and preferences. Some people want certain content at certain times of day. How much content do they want, and how can they access that? So what we're working on right now does work within our existing business model, but what we're really doing is laying the groundwork for all of the content, which is the key to all of this for the future, because then it'll be a matter of how are we able to develop that and distribute that to those audiences. And I'm kind of being a little ambiguous there because we can't give all the secrets away, but that's the core of what we're doing. So you're 100% right, and we're thinking about it that way as well.
How many board members are there at Cap Radio now?
Yeah, so we brought on, I believe it was, ended up being 10 board members. We had 6 from the past, which were just appointed, because Frank Maranzino is an appointee. So right now there's 16 board members that we currently have. I believe the current bylaws say we can have up to 35, but some of that might change.
I've got a few questions from the Zoom audience. So
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the comment, which is, it's informative, energetic, and well-organized presentation. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I appreciate
Let's
that.
start with a good comment. The next person asked, what plans are there to bring back the opera show on Saturday nights?
Well, yeah, that goes to part of that presentation where, there were some unfortunate layoffs and programming cuts. One of the things that that I will not do, we tend to like to under-promise and over-deliver with things. I'm not sure what plans there may be, but we're constantly talking and evaluating possible opportunities as we look at serving our community and our audiences. All I'm going to say is I'll leave it at that, but if there are any updates, we'll make sure that folks are aware.
Okay, one more from here, and then we'll go back to the audience. Says Luke Wood said that they'd been told Cap Radio had a reserve of about 3 million ? But in fact, there was only around 75,000. I may have the numbers wrong, but still, how was this caused and how resolved?
Yes. So when we look at everything that came to light in fall 2023, that was a piece of it. So when I talk about everything related to the CSU audit, the 17 observations, the 42 recommendations, this is all related to reporting, record keeping, audit compliance, and things like that. So for example, Cap Radio, which is absolutely not a best practice, had the same firm audit our finances for 12 years in a row. Now, what's interesting, and this is one thing that I will say, is that the best practice, so now we're working as an auxiliary and getting our finances audited by the auxiliary auditor, which gets changed up every 2 or 3 years. But the thing is, it's actually a best practice. And one of the things that we at Cap Radio are working on with our board and with Sacramento State is actually updating it and making it a requirement for us to change auditors every 2 to 3 years. And so this is something where when we're looking at the finances and everything else, and I have to be a little bit careful here in terms of what I potentially say, but the forensic examination and other things like that you may have read, let's just say that was one of those pieces, is information, the way some of those things were represented to the board, to Sacramento State, and otherwise were not necessarily accurate. And that's something that we're actively dealing with right now with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, with the CSU system and everything else is actually starting to look back at a lot of our prior year financials that were audited that we're finding out may not necessarily be accurate.
There was a lot of discussion about towers and
Yes.
KVIE wanting to buy, and whatever happened to that controversy?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm looking at my watch because this is a long story. But essentially, to try to make this, as brief as possible. So one of the things that came out from the CSU audit is that there was something that is called the Cap Radio Endowment. Now, the Cap Radio Endowment is actually a fully independent 501c3 organization that is not affiliated directly with Cap Radio or Sacramento State. Now, the way that we worked together and marketed it is that we were completely connected. And to be, and I will say, since our inception, we worked and were closely working with the endowment, but that was something that had been flagged by the CSU audit. And so what happened is, and again, I'm trying to be brief here, is that there were a lot of changes and the endowment technically had ownership of the land on the Alberta property that held the 90.9 KXJZ news tower. Now, at the time, the endowment also believed that they owned the tower on the land, but that was not the case. And so we have overwhelming documentation that shows that Cap Radio owns the tower and that the land itself also has permanent restricted use rights to benefit Cap Radio. Now, what had occurred is that the endowment made a donation to KVIE. And unfortunately, that donation was also accepted by KVIE. So what has occurred since then is that we're trying to find an amicable resolution to this issue. Cap Radio, no one at Cap Radio wants to be at odds with KVIE or the endowment. We're all in the public media family, but right now it's been a little bit of a standstill, if you will. And so we're trying to find a way to resolve that situation, and there will be more to come, but that's kind of what I can say about that issue right now. But I will tell you that nothing's going to happen to the tower, and Cap Radio does own the tower, and we will eventually resolve all of this one.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of content that you can't comment on, is there any chance that Mick Martin's Blues Party will come back? That was a 25-year run. I mean, that was a
Yeah, it's actually funny. I just saw Mick yesterday at an event at Solving Sacramento with the Creative Alliance, and he is a hoot, and I really like Mick. Well, we will see. Like I said, one of the things for us is that we've been focused on stabilizing everything, and as we're moving forward, we're looking at potential opportunities. I don't want to try to speculate. I don't want to try to get anyone's hopes up on related to anything, but we're looking at a number of different items as we move forward. So we'll have to wait and see. But I do feel you there. I love Mick. I love Mick. Yeah.
I don't know if it's in your bailiwick, but can you tell us anything about the downtown real estate, those two pieces of property?
A little bit. Can't dive into too many details there, but what I can tell you is that downtown, the 730 I Street, so there are two locations downtown. One is the 730 I Street headquarters. The other is the Cap Radio Live events venue. The 730 I Street location, I can tell you definitively that Cap Radio is not moving into that headquarters. We are staying on the 7055 Folsom Boulevard on the Sacramento State campus. It does meet our needs, and I will reinforce it also is a much more accessible location as we look at providing more opportunities for students at Sacramento State and otherwise. And that's something that's very important to us moving forward. We're here to serve the community, and 730 I Street, we're not going to move forward with that. The downtown location, I am happy to say that we are moving forward with. What we are doing is we're working in close collaboration with Sacramento State, and we're actually going to be launching very likely later this fall, winter, And it's going to be a learning lab and opportunity for us to also have CAP radio events and other community events. So we're actually really excited to work with Sacramento State and a variety of different departments for everything from arts and design, theater and dance, hospitality, and everything else related to that.
So are you going to divest yourself from that other property out of town, or do you still own both pieces of property?
So at 730 I Street, Cap Radio and Sacramento State. So Sacramento State's a co-tenant there. And so the only thing I can tell you at this point is that we're working on some solutions, and there will be more in the future, but that's really all I can say about that at the moment.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. This was really fabulous.
Thank you all.
Really,
I really appreciate it.
really wonderful. And I think we've already given you one, but we're giving you another honorary membership.
I mean,
in the
honestly,
Renaissance
it makes me feel
Society.
it made my week when I heard that. so
All
I'm so
right. We hope you
excited.
can take advantage of it. I know you're so busy, but we're also making a contribution in your name for the Seth Nelson Emergency
Oh,
Grant
thank you.
Fund. So
That's great.
thank you so, so much. And this is a First Friday, so if anybody still needs to donate to the ASI Food Pantry, please step forward and we'll make that happen. And one can also donate online. So next week, we're talking a little more about media. So we have Catherine Olmsted talking about the newspaper Axis 6 press barons who enabled Hitler. So that's going to be another interesting person. But another round of applause, please, for Chris. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you all. Thank you.